whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, or any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail Message, Rushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail Message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole.
Yo, that's it.
You got it. Okay, you cleared. Okay. So the
Yo, Sard, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing?
yeah.
Check one.
Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basics, change everything, without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail Message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals.
Sure.
And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author Rushin, which is, I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace, if we earnestly seek for the truth. So, dear listeners, just to remind you again, the topic for tonight is, what can we learn from the past? And again, it's really in the current climate of this coronavirus pandemic, we are really being, you could say, tested and having to look at ourselves and look at the world. And it reminds us of things that have happened in the past, with crises of the past. And so we thought this topic would be very appropriate again. And I think people are saying, oh, unprecedented times. And then you think, okay, when was it like similar times like this before? And in 1929, in America, there was a big depression, big stock market crash.
Yo.
And
just testing out my microphone, sir. Don't worry about it. I'm just doing a little check on my mic because it's not sounding sounding a bit funny. It's sounding a bit off my microphone, so I don't know which part or what it is.
Right.
Sounding a bit off.
Okay, so I'll continue. So, so as I said, in the America, USA, there was in 1929, there was a big depression. I think it basically continued all up till the Second World War.
Okay.
It was such a crisis for them. I mean, we also had the World War, not to forget, going on. And it was like, you could say, the biggest thing that happened to mankind in the modern times, at least. And now we are, obviously, people call it a war. It's obviously not with machine guns and things like that. It is a crisis for mankind now as well. So the obvious thing is, with our topic title tonight, what can we learn from the past? So again, I invite you, listeners, to join us with any question or comments. The number to contact us in UK, it is 07939641958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, Yeah, I've been talking about, the 1929 depression, and you can say Second World War, which is let's say the biggest sort of crisis mankind has faced in recent times. So recent times, have to be in context. It's 100 years, let's say, um, and now we are going through this pandemic, massive pandemic now. So what I want to ask you is it always going to be like this, Gregory, that we always have to have these crises? We don't seem to be able to handle or live in a way where we can have stability and you could say security or even happiness. It always seems that we keep stepping on or coming across these crises. Gregory?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you, but what's the question?
The question is that we're going through a crisis right now with this pandemic, and then we've had, let's say 100 years ago or so, a very big, they call it the Great Depression and World War II as well. And so my question is basically, is mankind going to continue to suffer this way, or will we ever get to some time where we have learned things and we actually have security and we have stability?
Well, the basics are such that if there are some challenges which should help you to learn lessons for the so-called future, and those lessons have not been learned, then the possibility is there that there is likely to be a repetition of something similar, because man hasn't learned how to overcome these challenges. If you take, for instance, where you have nations who do not exhibit any patience, they are very abrupt and very hostile, then the possibility of a war erupting is not far away. But as long as they have learned the lessons that they need to coexist with all others peacefully, then the idea of a war becomes remote and becomes foreign to them. So basically, it's because many a person or mankind in general haven't learned the necessary lessons they need to learn in order to live happily here in the world of matter, or particularly here on earth, but in general, in creation.
Thank you for that. And what it leads me to ask next, really, next thing I think about this is, we got the countries, we got, let's say, many organizations, then we have individual human beings, living in society. And so the consequences of these, you could say, or these crises, they affect the masses. And so my question about it is, obviously you can see that there's a general product, or you do something, and there's a result that affects the general population. Is there also somehow that some people are not, let's say, we've said it in the past, that they are the natural laws or the laws of creation, and when we align with the natural laws, then we can have, let's say, happiness and fruitful life, you could say. And when you don't align with your with the laws of creation or the laws of nature, then obviously you get hit from those the consequence of those things that we have done. So my question about the next question I would like to ask is the fate of the individual always let's say the good people, individual good people, will they always suffer the consequences of the mass action of the masses, or can they be protected?
It's quite remarkable you mentioned good people. How many are there who are able to know what is in store for them.
One.
How many
Check
are there
one.
who are able to know consciously the sort of they had sown in the past,
Yep.
how they have lived in the past? So good people, not as defined by fellow human spirits who are as ignorant as the so-called good people, but good people as defined and accepted through the laws of nature through which everyone came into existence. For it is such that what a human personality does not deserve will not come to it. For if you haven't sown that which is unpleasant, you yourself will not reap what is unpleasant. Unless, however, you as a personality has taken it upon yourself to experience these things in order to mature and help many other people. So it must be that lessons unlearned have to repeat themselves, because the same errors will have to be precipitated by humanity. And that is why these things keep coming back.
All right, Saad, can you hear me?
Yes.
I heard the question, yeah, and to me, yeah, it's man on the earth that is causing this problem, yeah. So I don't see there being any peace until man themselves decide to stop doing the wickedness that they're doing on the earth. That's how I see it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm listening to what you're saying,
okay, and Gregory, do you want to respond to that?
It's man, Gregory.
I cannot agree more or less with him, for all these have been precipitated through the behavior of mankind. Just look at very carefully. When one part of the world was experiencing challenges with health, the other part sat comfortably and said, well, it's not in my domain, so I'm not bothered. And now when it came to their domain, they found they couldn't do anything, and they started dying like flies. Another example one would give is during the rise of dictators in Germany in the 20s. There was Hitler with all sorts of policies decimating people. As long as he didn't hit some other people personally, they felt comfortable. So one by one, all those who could oppose him were removed, while others were silent. And when subsequently it came to their turn, they found that there was no one there for them who could support them. Whereas it would have been one for all for one. So it's very clear. Again, you can see even in everyday life. Look at the nurses. Look at the medical professionals who are to help many a person back to health. What sort of respect in terms of payment do you give to them? Next to nothing. Whereas those who are involved in kicking some balls everywhere were paid the highest. Now you ask yourself, the unique tool that the human spirit needs to experience here on earth is the physical body. And those who are to help in ensuring your physical body is safe and sound, those ones are ignored and paid next to nothing. So when the problems come, these are the same people whom you want to be in the front line to save many a person. So it's very, very clear. It means that priorities have to be rearranged such that it will be of benefit to all.
Thank you for that, Gregory. And I want to look at, let's say, some things in the past to sort of relate to us now. I just got to find this story so I can actually talk about it. Just a moment. Let's see. I should have prepared this earlier. Here we go. I might have to talk about it a bit later on when I've actually got it ready. So let me not do that right now. Okay. So Gregory, you mentioned the laws, how I think it's appropriate to bring that up because everything happens within these natural laws. And so I think it's important to people actually are made aware of it. Oops. Oh, I've got a listener. Let me just take this call. Hello, listener.
Yes, hello.
Hello. You got a question?
Yes, Mena.
Mena, yes. How are you?
Yes. In talking about the past, in order to set the context properly, so we have a good understanding of where we.
Okay, Mena, just put off your sound on the background so you can hear you properly.
Okay, I'll try that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, in talking about the past, I think it's also good to set the context properly and to actually establish where the human spirit is coming from, what it has, neglected to do right from the origin of its, coming into subsequent creation. Mm-hmm. So we could know what we have, what we've been set to do, the tasks we've been set to do, and what we have been neglecting, at the stages of our development.
Right.
Up to the present time, yeah.
So just to repeat that, basically, what is the task of the human being on the earth, right?
Yes, and what it has been neglecting to do, to establish, in the past, and what, it keeps on, and that's why we keep having reminders or, let me say, cosmic shocks, to remind us of, our failure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to, Gregory, did you hear that?
Yes, I had, but that's only a basis for questioning. And based on such, then one may respond. But no questions have been asked and been raised from that framework yet.
I will turn it into a question then. So what I'd like to make, the question I'd like to ask Gregory is, what actually is the task of the human being? And let's start.
Sorry, I thought you were asking a question initially.
Yes, and that is there was a call just now from this Mena, and I just thought I would put that question to you now, and then I can put that after you've answered Mena, I can bring my question again.
Okay.
So if you could, the question I'm asking based on what Mena has just spoken is, what actually is our task? Because you see, then we will know where we are failing. You see, because all we know is that we are failing, but we don't know what exactly, the context. Just like Mena said, there's a context to it. So what is the context for man on the earth? What should he be? What is the task he should be performing?
Basically, the task of the human personality is to experience and get to know the earth. And in making use of these experiences, it will then mature, which maturity will be such that it's able to adjust its perspective, its abilities to the laws of nature or generally the laws of creation through which it came into existence. Only through such maturity is it able to adjust itself, is it able to recognize its purpose here on earth and other parts in creation, such that when it has achieved that maturity or consciousness, or specifically self-consciousness, is able now to return to its origin, which one may call the paradise of man, and continue further activities. Generally, that is the picture.
Thank you for that. And the question that I had before this call came was basically, you mentioned the laws, natural laws of creation or laws of nature, which we have to work with. And I think it would be good to say what they are, so that obviously this is clear, because they are always acting, and it maybe I could say that most of us are not really aware of them. So I think that needs to be brought out as well. So if you could tell us these laws.
It will not be right to say that the human personality is unaware of the laws of creation through which it came into existence. That would be a very wrong picture. It is aware of them, but it hasn't allowed these laws to become personal to the extent that he can then use them consciously or self-consciously. For here on earth, there is no human personality who does not have to exchange. That means to breathe in and breathe out. So it would be wrong to say they are not aware. So basically, when one examines the whole picture, the laws of nature is what we all referred to. But first, we ourselves must be very clear what nature is when the laws of nature are discussed. And why should we call these patterns, these features, laws of creation? They are only laws of creation because they apply to everything that exists in nature, the largest and also the smallest. Otherwise, they would not be called the laws of creation or laws of nature. They are also called the laws of nature because these laws do not, within themselves, change. They remain the same yesterday, they remain the same today and tomorrow. So they are not time dependent. When one considers these things very carefully, it becomes very clear why they are called laws of nature. The first one which man may consider is that of motion. That motion is a law in nature or a law in creation. For all that one sees or perceives with the five senses, these are always in motion. Which motion must have come into existence through the laws of, or the law of reciprocity. That law of reciprocity is what is one of the underlying, the cornerstone feature in nature, which has always been there from the very beginning. Reciprocity in giving and taking. It is that which has defined motion, which motion is a law. For whatever gives and does not take, or whoever takes and does not give, that will be a violation of that particular law. A second one, which one may mention very briefly, is that of the attraction of similar or homogeneity. The attraction of homogeneity, which one is sometimes referred to as the attraction of similar species. It means those who are in motion, those that have similar features or similar qualities come together. One is stressing here similar or homogeneous qualities or features. They assemble in one place. This is also one of the cornerstones of the laws of nature. And the third one is that of density. Whenever there is in any scenario that which is dense and that which is lighter, that which is lighter moves up, whereas that which is dense sinks. This is how it has always been. So we have what may be referred to as the law of spiritual gravity. Gravity which has arisen from density, from denseness. That we have just spoken about is only a quick summary of the laws of creation, the laws of nature, through which all processes, all existence reside.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory, and sort of going comprehensively into what the natural laws are and really giving the background to it as well. So thank you for that. And I just want to add that these laws work automatically. Reciprocity, you do the action and the reaction is brought by nature. You are attracted to, you said, attraction of similar species or homogeneous species. So, or we have a saying, birds of a feather flock together. So let's say you're of a smoker, and then you are automatically attracted to another fellow smoker. It's just a natural thing. So and it will happen when I say naturally, you don't have to even look for that. People will just come on your path like that. And as I say, it's not only that; it can be anything. So just to realize that as well. So, dear listeners, I want to tell you, listening to Bless Radio is the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdushin. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail Message or want some more information on the Grail Message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is, what can we learn from the past? Bearing in mind of the crisis that we're going through at the moment, and then we've had them in the past as well. So what can we learn from the past? You can join in the discussion with any questions or comments. The number to contact us, our UK number is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 004479 39 641 958. Now, there's something I wanted to read to you, listeners, which is, there was a pandemic. We've had a pandemic in the 1918 as well, the Spanish flu. And then also before, it looks like almost every 100 years, there seems to be this pattern. And this is a story, a very brief one, of one story in 1720, where there was a pandemic in Marseille, France. So I'll just read this. In 1720, a ship was quarantined at the port of in Marseille because a strange infection was killing on the ship. The deputy mayor of Marseille lifted the quarantine to help the economy. I think this is like a headline story rather than going into specifically. So 100,000 people died. More than half the people of Marseille died. This was the Great Plague of Marseille. The government of Marseille felt they could not afford to lose all the valuable goods on the ship, as it would destroy the economy. And as they lifted the quarantine, they moved the goods into the city of Marseille, and they moved also the infection. And this is the story of the journey before the ship arrived to Marseille. The ship left Sidon in Lebanon, picked up people at Tripoli and Cyprus, which already had infection outbreak. A Turkish man on the ship got infected first and died, and then several sailors died. The ship's surgeon also died. As the ship got to Marseille, the doctors quarantined it. Now, because Marseille had a very huge trading agreement with the Levant, which is the term for the countries including Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey, Israel, and Jordan, and Palestine, the government was convinced by the businessmen that the quarantine on the ship has to be removed and the goods released. Some powerful businessmen, led by the deputy mayor of Marseille, who was also the owner of the ship, convinced his friends in the government to release the quarantine. Some merchants needed the cotton and silk cargo on the ship to do business for the upcoming festival in Beauquay. It was only a matter of days later, the infection broke out in the whole of Marseille. People started dropping dead. They died, so much died there, there were no graves to bury them. Dead bodies littered the streets of Marseille. Till today, the people of Marseille remember the story. Apparently, what happened was the government tried to be clever. They told themselves, we will only move the silk and cotton on the ship into the city, but not the infected people on the ship. In moving the goods, they unknowingly moved the infected rats, which infected the people. I'm going to just stop there because I think the point is there, Gregory. So, we're having the pandemic now, and we're more aware of that, obviously, what is happening now. So what I'm trying to ask you, Gregory, is, yes, there's we have to look after our well-being and health and so on, and then there's a other issue of the economy and things like that. How do we decide, or let's say governments and so on, what way they should move forward? Because this pandemic, the cure is not available like immediately. And if we, let's say, allow the people to be just free to move around, this obviously will kill a lot of people. At the same time, there's a consequence of during the lockdown, that's what we're having at the moment. There's a suffering, economic suffering, sort of happening as well, and it's more than economic. We can see social, and in many aspects it's happening. So, Gregory, what I want to ask you now, when this type of things happen, pandemic crisis happens, what should be the basis of how we move forward with dealing with it? Is it like minimize the deaths of human beings and at the expense of the economy, you could say, and other things? I'm making just these two because they're, let's say, the two biggest ones, obvious ones. It's more than just that, we know that. So how do we go forward when this type of crisis happens? Is it should be only on health reasons we move forward to make measures for that, or should we look at the economy as well? And how do you go about it?
The question that each person should ask themselves: is it possible to have an economy when there are no personalities involved? If it is possible to have an economy when there are no persons involved, then many can make up their mind. Only those who are alive can form an economy. And after all, what is a market? The market is a place where goods are sort of exchanged. And who are the participants? These participants are human beings in here on earth. So, first things first, take good care of the participants in an so-called that form the structure of an economy, and the rest will be history. If, on the other hand, no good care is taken of the participants, then before long, there will be no economy. In the meantime, when there are so many problems, one can only ask that the rules of engagement be flexible. Be flexible for the participants who wish to ensure there is an ongoing economy. It would be wrong to set principles and say, okay, maybe you should do this and not do that, maybe you should do this and not do that. Many times it is best if these things never occurred. Is it not said that prevention is better than cure? Could things like this not be prevented? So this is always a challenge. Those who, at the beginning, ignored it are the ones paying very dearly for it. Whereas those who face the challenges squarely do not have as much problems as they have now. They are not even talking about the economy. Some responded to it very calmly and prepared themselves. For those who didn't prepare themselves, it only means they had prepared to fail. Those who fail to prepare only prepared to fail. So if the question then comes up, how should we do it in this sort of catastrophe? Very simple. Prepare yourself. Always be on the alert. Be vigilant in all that one do. If, on the other hand, one falls behind in vigilance, then most likely one will fall along the line and will be terribly injured. How one is to treat oneself, maybe that's the core of your question. One can only keep stressing, be vigilant, even in this present condition, to ensure that re-affection or the infection does not come back. There are only theories as of now as to, okay, maybe you've had it, you won't have it again. It was the same problem when it was said, oh, it's a normal flu, it won't do anything. So such statements are based on lack of vigilance. For if they are to be very observant, they will find a simple cure is very close to them. But because they themselves have ignored it, they keep falling ill. So the only advice one may give in this scenario is that of vigilance. Vigilance before many things occur. Vigilance before this came to strike. Vigilance even in this particular scenario. To observe that which may come back to strike one if one is not vigilant.
Thank you, Gregory, for the comprehensive view. There's quite a few things you've said in your answer, which I would like to go into.
Hello, Saad. Hello, Saad. Hello, Saad. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit louder. I'm going to fix it in a minute. You got another brother on the line, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, who's the other brother?
That is called Mena, but he was phoning in, and now
Okay.
he's not on the line now.
Okay. All right then.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All
Did
right.
you
Cool.
want him to say something?
No, it's just that I'm gonna turn my microphone down. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's now he's not on the phone now, so it's gone now. Okay. So it's just me and Gregory right now.
All right. Look, I just turn my microphone down. Yeah. All
Yes,
right. Cool.
please. Yeah. So Gregory, what you were saying, I noticed a few things there. So obviously, you can't have an economy without human beings alive. Uh, but also, I'm thinking of something called balance, because you can't have everybody, just
Shukran.
quarantine like we are doing lockdown at the moment,
Yep.
because even in the
Yeah.
quarantine,
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody has to go to work, isn't it? Somebody has to be in the hospital. Somebody has to deliver the food, and some shops have to remain open. So, and then I noticed you use the word flexible. You have to be flexible, so you can't be like, for something to operate. If everybody was locked down, nothing will kind of happen, of course. So I think that word flexible and maybe the word balance is the key thing. And especially when you're in a crisis, you actually don't know. You only have to look at the important things first, and then provide those things, and then obviously build yourself back, because obviously it's quite as long as there's no cure for something like this, we can't just walk out of the house
Check
as if
you one
everything's
too.
back to normal. As they
There you
say,
are.
there's going to be a new normal now. It's not going to be when they unlock, or let's say slowly release the lockdown. It will not be the same as it was, um, as it has been before that.
All right,
And
Saad.
I know the government is on.
Saad. Hi, Saad. Hello, Saad. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm
Right.
good,
Just a
thank
quick
you. Yes.
question. Do you think that this lockdown's been for about a month? Yeah. It's about a month.
Yes,
Yeah. Most other
at least a
countries,
month.
yeah, most other countries have had their lockdown for about 3 months. Yeah.
I can't hear you now.
Right.
Can
I
you
said
say?
most other countries has had their lockdown for about 3 months.
Yes, it's been quite some time for some of the other countries.
Right. So
Yes.
do you think it's too early to let people go out to live a normal life?
Okay. I'm going to take that question, Gregory, if you're okay with that. So I will say everybody's on coming from different starting position. If you look at New Zealand, they did the lockdown. I mean, they did hardly had much of a coronavirus hit them, but they did a very quick lockdown. Uh, you know, uh, and it just didn't spread over there at all, hardly. And they just locked everybody down, and then they're already opening, almost like, I will say, they're being cautious, and but they're basically opening up, and they've had no cases at all, pretty much. They decide to open up. So what I want to say, my basic point is that every country will have to do its own approach. It can't be the same for everybody, but the foundation or the principles is going to be obviously on a similar track. So, and it's really to do with the starting point, because if you implemented all these lockdown things right at the beginning, then obviously your suffering is much less. While those countries who were a bit slow or weren't even ready, let's say, like Gregory mentioned that at the beginning, that people were not ready, then guess what? We are suffering more. And so the recovery is going to take a while to be there as well. And it is something new. I mean, they keep saying it's unprecedented and things like that. So it's like a learning curve how to get out of this situation.
Sorry,
They have
may
to,
I come in?
yeah, go. Yes, Gregory, you want to say something? Go on.
It is not unprecedented. For there was a scenario like this in 1917 to 1918. It is because the lessons had not been learned, or they were not vigilant enough to know how to respond, and apply the lessons learned. These lessons were ignored. So what is now being paid for is the lack of vigilance in ensuring that situations like this, which had happened in the past, like you said, it has happened in France, in Marseille, it happened in Spain. So the one that happened in Spain killed millions. This one hasn't killed millions. So it is not unprecedented when you have governments being so inactive or are not prepared to look into the welfare of their citizens, then this sort of catastrophe is what hits. For those, like you mentioned, New Zealand, Sweden, a few other countries, why did it not hit them that severely? It only means that they were always on the alert. To be on the alert doesn't mean you have massive gadgets to be able to predict what could happen. To be on the alert only means one has to learn, to be alert in one's intellectual activities and intuitive activities, such that a scenario like this, once perceived, is taken very seriously and acted upon. But when these things are ignored, then there's very little that can be done. A typical example, look at the UK. Do you have to lose 30,000 people before you learn a lesson? This one, look at the US. Do you have to lose 60,000 people before you learn a lesson? Could these things not have been done at the beginning? And like other countries that were able to act very quickly, would they not have spent about maybe 10 million pounds or $10 million to prevent the loss of maybe 500 billion? You ask yourself, penny wise, pound foolish. So when people now turn around and say it's unprecedented, they are not serious. The lessons are there. This had occurred before. It's only to ensure that you take the necessary precautions such that when such a thing is sensed, you act very quickly. Even in the midst of this so-called pandemic, countries which respond in such a way as to minimize, not wipe it out. After all, cancer has not been wiped out, but it's managed. So the key here, how does one manage in the midst of this type of scenario? Vigilance. But the lessons are not learned. Then they will keep coming again and again until one learns that these things will come, but knowing that they come and you know how to apply the vaccines. Unprecedented, there was Ebola. Why did it not spread everywhere? Because at that time, some of the leaders took quick action to ensure it is contained. So man should not deceive itself by using smart words to sort of conceal their ineptness.
Thank you for that, Gregory. The only thing I would add to that is this coronavirus, not to get into too much of details of these things, because we want to look at the spiritual side of everything. I mean, every time these things happen, there are new viruses coming, and so of course it's a learning curve. But so you could not prepare in a sense of you could have some sort of preparation, but it's not like a complete preparation that you're used to this every time it comes. So there's still a learning curve how to deal, because apparently this what the doctors or scientists are saying to us is, oh, this has this effect, this affects this way, and in the previous flu pandemic those things didn't happen. So there's something new happening in this case that didn't happen previously. So mostly it affects the elderly, 50% apparently, because of the not a weaker immune system, but then it also hits other people as well. And so there's it's still I 100% agree, Gregory, with you that obviously we need to prepare. So the better you prepare, the better you deal with it. And other countries have dealt with it because they were in the same boat as well. They didn't know anything either, and they've dealt with it better. So I agree with that. It's just always to be aware that things are new, and then you just have to be prepared, however, whatever the new thing is. So thank you for that. Um, there's something what I would like to talk about. Other things that have happened in the past in history, you can say, not just pandemic. So I just want to point those things out. Let me just open this. I just want to check something before I talk about it. So, this is a little bit different from what we talking about right now about the pandemic, but I just want to mention these things. So, Gregory, let's talk about history, yes, and where there are governments or countries where things happen, and let's say the people who are in charge or the ruling people, they want to subdue the people who are rebels or who they don't agree with, and well, somebody's. Oh, I think I'm sorry, I got a call there. So basically, what happens? What I want to say, the Gregory, is people who are in charge. They have some. They write the history, and then it's like they sense a thing, and they try to write it out of the thing. So I'm going to give an example, and this is not meant to be biased to one side or to the other side. So for example, in Russia, in the Soviet Union time, when Stalin was in charge, or just before Lenin, let's say Lenin was there, in the communist era, there was another, let's say, big figure in the Russian communist community, if I can say like that, leadership. He was Trotsky, and he was uh, let's say, against some of the things maybe Lenin was doing, and then and in a way he was put away. And then when Stalin, who was the next leader who took over, it was he did what he wanted to do, and then they took Trotsky out of the, let's say, their history. He's known in the West, but in the Soviet Union, he was written out. So what I'm trying to say, Gregory, this is not common to, let's say, only happened in Soviet Russia. It has happened all throughout history. People who are in charge or running their country, whatever it is, they seem to be dictating or writing their history, which, how can I say, the country they're leading is, would just follow that without realizing, because in those days there wasn't the internet, it wasn't anything like that. They could find things out themselves. So I'm using this as an example of what the point I want to make here is people are always talking about the events from their point of view and doctor things for themselves. And then maybe only 100 years later, the actual reality of what happened comes out, or it might not even come out because it's hidden so well, right? So that's one example. And what
May
I
I
want.
respond to that?
Yes, go ahead.
There was the time of Nero, when it is a fact he was the emperor in Rome. And Nero was in charge and had the Christians murdered, bastardized, decimated, killed everywhere. At that time, Rome, people didn't have internet, didn't have a lot of these things. But subsequently, what happened? All that is evil will only exist temporarily. Before long, that which is of the truth and is of fact will emerge. It's always the case where many, thinking or considering themselves to be in charge, like to commit such atrocities and then turn them around and call them truth. But before too long, they will then realize that here on earth, these things are temporal. Not only in Russia, there was it in Germany, in many communities. Only that which is genuine has a lasting value. All other things which that are not genuine are not lasting, for they are not strengthened. They will collapse because they themselves contain the germ which will now gnaw into the framework, and at the time of reaping, the whole thing will show the barrenness, and most of these things will then collapse. That's most of the time is what you find in history. There are some who just want to conquer other countries because they sense or they consider themselves to be strong. But what happens? The facts always remain there. One can look at the case of David and the Goliath. So these things have always been there in history, where people will commit acts and they call that the truth. The facts, they will delete them and say there are no facts. So those things don't last long. They are only temporary. For the laws of creation or the laws of nature will ensure that which man has put in creation and distorted, that will definitely come to fruition, and then they themselves will have to reap the fruits or the barrenness of the fruits and clean out everything. And therefore, such things cannot cannot last for very long. So one should be very reticent and should observe these things very carefully and need not have any fear, for only that which is built on love, the support for one's neighbor. By one's neighbor doesn't mean it has to be the one living nearest to you. It could be very far off, as far as Japan. History can also be looked at when you look at so-called Japanese atrocities in China. For no just cause, those Chinese were murdered. No reason other than Japan wanted to show its might. It is written. So whether it is deleted from history books or not doesn't matter. For the truth will ensure everything in times like this will be revealed. That which is spiritual and upbuilding will last forever. That which is not of upbuilding but destruction will collapse on the long run.
Thank you so much for that answer, Gregory. I've got something to follow up on that, but before I ask you that question, I would like to tell the listeners you're listening to Blessed Radio. This is the spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Shin. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail Message or want some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is, what can we learn from the past? You can join in the discussion by contacting us on this UK number, which is 079 39641 958. All text use WhatsApp. If you're outside of UK, it's 00447495. Again, you can use WhatsApp. But in your sort of lengthy answer about history, where the rulers seem to delete, let's say, the truth, you can say. Uh, uh, there's another aspect I want to look at, which is that the people in power, it's the people in power that seem to continue, and then either through corruption or self-interest, or somebody stronger coming in, they're taken over by someone else who's more powerful. And that the one who's more powerful is not necessarily better than the one they have taken over from. So I want to just check the laws, the natural laws that we're talking about. I mean, we always say it should be love that should, drive everything, the foundation for everything. But in history, or in our, let's say, in the observation of what is going on in let's say the real world, if I can say that way, it doesn't appear that when somebody is removed by someone else, that they're being removed or replaced by somebody who's in the loving, is more like somebody just stronger and more powerful, and they're no better than the one they're replacing. They just happen to be more powerful, and maybe even the old one who's being replaced is just become weaker, and he's just it's come to the end of his time. Corruption or whatever is taken over, and they're just collapsing. So how can we really be sure that actually love is the laws are acting, let's say, in a just manner, and it's not just somehow man replacing one let's say evil with another evil?
When you said how can we be sure, the people themselves must examine what their conceptions are, their conceptions of life. Is it based on support for one another in a community or in a larger community? If that is the case, then in all probability, they would not attract those people who will come to subdue them. For in their vigilance and alertness, they will attract persons of similar nature to be their leaders. So generally, one will find that those, or sometimes the leaders that you have in many of these nations, is more like a representative of the collective conceptions which they hold. Many who like to be dictatorial force others without paying attention to the challenges that others have. If you have people like that, then those are the ones that will be elected. For were the people so much on the alert or vigilant enough, they, through their activities, would have seen through the charade that the so-called leaders are displaying. Only through hard work is one able to, within himself, perceive what challenges are there, such that they will know how to respond. And one thing should be very clear, and which is very simple. You cannot give to some person or some community that which you do not have, even if you pretend you have it. For a leader without patience cannot exercise patience with the community. A leader without love in his heart or her heart cannot give out that love which he himself lacks he can only put a charade about it. So also in many things. If, on the other hand, you have those who aspire to live through their conceptions, through their work, through the way they do things, then one is able to ascertain if this is a true leader or just putting up a charade. There is no need to go deeper into all these things, for you can find these things represented all over the world. Find the countries where you had the least problems in the so-called coronavirus. Those who inwardly had real love for their nation did everything to protect such that these challenges won't come and overwhelm their peoples.
Okay, I'm sad.
Others were sleeping and considering that which will be of benefit to them alone. All man needs to do is to examine only a bit and draw their conclusion. But no, many will go to bed and sleep. Vigilance is not on their agenda. In such a case, they have made their decisions.
You turn off your recording behind you. Thank you, Gregory, for that answer. I've got a listener on the line again, Mena. Mena, are you there? Okay, let me put you on loudspeaker so we can give you.
Yes.
Go ahead, please, Mena.
Yeah, can you just quickly note them, because I might not be able to, ask all the questions, subsequently.
Okay.
Now, I have 3 questions. Now, the first question is now that we're exposed to another, cosmic shock.
Yes.
So what, or where specifically is man failing? Because we've had, pandemics in the past, we have world wars, we had financial crashes in the past. What is specific? Where is it specifically? Where is it specifically that man is failing? What knowledge should we now be embracing? So that's the second question.
Okay.
And then the last question is that, are a number of deaths, necessarily a criteria for actually analyzing containment at the number of deaths per country?
Yes.
The criteria for,
Okay.
What can we put a finger on what actually is, in control of such a spread?
You mean criteria?
Number of deaths, are different in different countries.
Okay.
Where we put the law of the attraction of homogeneity?
Okay. So you've got 3 questions. So let me go ahead and go one at a time. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mena, for that question. I'll say it to Gregory. Gregory, I'm going to repeat it to you so that just one question at a time. Can you hear me, Gregory?
Yes.
You can hear me. Just before I do go to that question, Gregory, you talked about leadership. I'm going to ask those questions, but I just want to follow on from what you've been saying. So basically, leadership, which you say is the representation of the people in that country or community, yes? And it's a reflection of them. So you get the leaders you deserve, you can say like that, right? So that if that is the case, in a way you could say, even we can look at the world right now, because it's better to look at the things, how the world is right now. But I also want to, as we say, learn from history, because we've said, what can we learn from the past? So let me say, currently, we have scientists, what the government, let's say, we just look at the UK, for example, otherwise it will get too complicated. So let's say for UK, for example, the government is saying, we're listening to the scientific advice, yes? Almost as if it's only the scientists who know how to can help us out of this situation, sorry. But you can see it can't let me not try to answer that question. So, So Gregory, what can you say about the leadership? This is not about a political comment, by the way. We know that we're not into politics here, but just in a general way, Gregory, what the situation in UK right now, let's say, how it is being going forward, would you say that is a good leadership? Or, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. By their works, we shall know them. That should answer that question very well.
Okay. Let me say another example, which is from the 1920s and 30s, when this 1929 depression hit America. It was not only America, but that example, we'll take that as an example. It's easy to look at one country. So basically, there was a stock market crash, and then there was an election also in that year, and Roosevelt became the president, and he had and he won like quite. I don't know if it was a landslide, but it was a big victory. And basically, the previous president was not, let's say, it looked like he hadn't taken the effect of the crisis so seriously as how Roosevelt was tackling it. So this is not some I can say. I'm just giving a bit of information about this situation so that we can discuss it, basically. And from my research, I discovered that Roosevelt had a plan, you can say, a 3-pronged plan, which was to provide relief to the unemployed, recovery for the economy, and reform of the financial system. Because up to this point before, Gregory, as you have mentioned, if you're not prepared, you're going to suffer for not being prepared. So I'm not talking about the pandemic in this case. This was a financial crash which affected the whole country. But things were not right with the, let's say, society and the system in those days. Let's say things were not regulated, things were not done properly, and then it all exploded into the crash, and it had a very big impact, a bit like what we are going through now. So the point is that Roosevelt came at this time, and he had a plan for the to recover, provide relief of the unemployed, like we're getting it, let's say, for UK as well, something similar. Then he had a plan for recovery of the economy, and then he also had some reform for the financial system, and they did eventually get out. It took years because there was also a world war. We mustn't forget that was also going on. But in the end, America did come out of that situation. So my question on that, Gregory, is really the leaders. Really, we say they're a reflection of the people, but can there be somebody like, let's say, a helper, where who just, let's say, because of this degree of the emergency, can come out, can come and surface and help the people, so help that country? Or is it just on how the people are that will draw the leader out, the good leader out?
When the need is greatest, the help from on high is always there. At that time of the so-called crash, many of them saw within that the structures which they had set up do not guarantee a balance of equilibrium. And maybe many were then opened. Of course, there are people out there who looked and asked themselves basic questions and came up with a plan if they didn't have a plan before. So you find that at such times when the soil had collapsed, or when the floor had collapsed, new structures which could not withstand initially the sort of turbulence which had entered the society. New structures have to come up, and they had to learn the lessons very quickly. That is how the man, the president you mentioned, brought out so-called New Deal in order to ensure that the financial system cannot just collapse. It collapsed not because of the fault of the ordinary working man, collapsed because of the structures which had been set up, which do not permit the balance of equilibrium, the circulation of the monetary system to be of benefit to all. It was only of benefit to very few. Money is created by government. Money was not created by nature. So money is artificial. And therefore, if you put structures in place which do not reflect the balance of equilibrium, which is expected in nature, or which do not vibrate or do not resonate with the laws of nature, through which all these human spirits and things have arisen, before too long, it will be shown that those structures have flimsy feet. Those institutions are not durable, for the time will come when there will be turbulence. Turbulence is a fact of nature. Like you have the seasons. If you go to the desert, all right? So these things are facts and cannot be denied. If therefore you build your structure, your house, in such a way that when the rains come, or when there is thunder and lightning, and the structure you have put in place is not strong enough, it will be either blown away or shattered. These are facts. These cannot be denied. And therefore, the so-called financial system, which is artificial, must be restructured in such a way that the balance of equilibrium, which allows movement from the smallest to the highest, that has to be re-established in such a way there is balance in the lower system, in the middle structure, and in the upper structure. Whether that has been put in place remains to be seen. So it is men themselves that have built these structures. You do not have the scenario of a whole mountain blown up all of a sudden. It is man that builds bridges. It is man that does most of these things, and in doing it, they are not intuitive enough to consider the scenario where turbulence will come in. And that is why you find the works of men, as long as they are very, very intellectual, don't last for long. If you consider the case of, say, you find in the arts, you hear of music. Music, which was composed 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, is still being played and enjoyed. That is in the arts, where they are a bit more intuitive. Consider the case of the so-called technical structures that we're talking about most of the time, which are quite artificial. Consider that about 10, 15 years ago, you had Nokia. Almost every year, there are new things. These things are flimsy, are very temporal. They don't last long. So in the works of men, in the structures which are a representation of their works, they should ensure that the balance of equilibrium is maintained. Only on such a basis can you have that which is more permanent than they have now. As long as that is ignored, then catastrophes upon catastrophes are bound to occur. These catastrophes only exhibit themselves accordance to the laws of nature.
Thank you for that, Gregory. In a way, you've covered the answer, a question that Mena was also asking, the first question, which is like, if I just say what it was, we've had pandemics, world wars, financial crashes in the past, and they've been solved scientifically and intellectually. And now we're exposed to another worldwide cosmic shock, which is what the current one that we're going through. Where is man specifically failing? So I think you've answered that. Or do you want to say a bit more on that? Where is man specifically failing? Just to reiterate that.
Well, like it's been stressed. The works of man and the failures are such that the structures which they have put in place have not been well considered. Very simple examples one can mention. Look at the so-called oil market. Look at their spots. Look at some of the structures, the examples we gave before. Those people who are responsible in the well-being of the physical well-being of man, those people are not even considered to be anything. They are just looked down upon. However, when the physical body has problems, they know where to run to. The same thing happens with the so-called financial structures, where government prints the paper to give to many of the so-called corporations, which corporations will do as they like without an oversight to ensure there is no body to ensure that these things are distributed in harmony, such that it will percolate to those who are involved in production. What then happened? Some of the so-called big boys keep these things away and allow those who have been doing the hard work to go hungry. Is it that the earth is not producing enough resources for many to feed on? That is not the case. Another case can be picked up. Go to the Congo and see how nations have been destroyed. How resources which could have been used to help in the upbuilding have been stolen. And what do we have? On the one side, many people or many countries claim they are happy and they look down haughtily on all others who do not have such financial systems. The earth consists of many nations, consists of human spirits who have come here in order to experience, gain enough experience, become conscious and self-conscious spiritually. For the inner core of man is of spirit, which spirit needs to mature through vigorous activities and ensure those activities are in accordance with the laws of nature or with the laws of creation. In such a way, they are able to ascend back home, becoming self-conscious when they get back home. Therefore, they had incarnated here on earth. But why on earth? What do we find? Some parts of them decide to look down on others, not supporting. Such balance or such imbalance must be addressed. And know that the resources of this earth are meant to be used judiciously in the benefits of all who have come here on earth. But the question, is that the case? Each nation must face that. If not, what will happen is that the challenge in one country will before long also be felt in another country. Something will happen, and the so-called virus has given a simple example where it was mentioned one for all and all for one.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for your answer there. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The topic we're discussing tonight is what can we learn from the past? Before I give you the phone number, I just want to remind you that the aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdrusheen. And you can get a copy for yourself, or you get some more information by going to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And just remind you again, the topic for tonight is what can we learn from the past? And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us, our UK number, which is 07939641958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00447939641958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, there was Mena had 3 questions, so we've dealt with the first one. The second one is he was asking if there's a knowledge which can help with the, with the crisis that we're in, and yes, I'll just say that.
The knowledge which will be helpful in crises like this, that knowledge is the knowledge about the laws of creation or the laws of nature, which we've always been mentioning, through which all came into existence. What one may say at this point is that the work in the light of truth, the Grail Message, is of such. However, it is useless just to mention that the work is of help. It is of help only to those who examine it and make use of it for themselves. For if you have resources in your hand and you do not make use of those resources, then will that say that is of help? First, it is necessary to examine this work to ensure that indeed what it offers is a picture of creation, also looking at the purpose of man, understanding the laws through which he himself, the spirit of man, came into existence and what his purpose is. And also knowing that the structure, which is called creation, really exists and is not just based on imagination. Only on such a framework, on such a basis, can he or she move forward. And as soon as he or she makes use of such a knowledge to help in understanding all processes in nature, all processes in creation, then he or she becomes free. For it is like spiritual bread, which sort of gives you the strength. It is like light, which animates. And as long as one has a clear vision and make use of that which has been offered for his own benefit, then one may talk of hell. For many of the theories, so-called economic theories which have been put out there, many of the theories, in quote, the health theories which have been put out there, if they are of help or if they were of help, how come many people are still dying? So one must ensure that help that is mentioned is genuine help. That help also which is of spiritual help. Therein is the beginning. From there it percolates down such that the inner personality can adjust itself to these laws, to these processes, such that when turbulence arises, if at all it arises, in its vigilance, which is required of man, he or she intuitively has foreseen it and has taken the necessary precautions.
Thank you for that, Gregory. It actually leads to the third question that Mena is asking, which is about the number of deaths in a country in this catastrophe. Is that like a proof of the containment or how good the containment is working? So yes, so the number of deaths that are happening in each country with this pandemic, is that like is that a proof of how good their containment is working? And he's adding to that. We've talked about the natural law, about the law of attraction of homogeneity. Is that playing a role in that, that number of deaths that we are talking about?
The thing one should consider, is there any need for many to die on something which could have been prevented? The number only remains a number. As to assigning the number of people who have passed on, as to the containment or non-containment, is to a large extent an intellectual one. For as seen from a spiritual standpoint, structures which have been flimsy can easily be recognized and can be seen that in times like this, it depends on how either governments or people how they respond to the challenges before them. But to make a calculation on how the containment have been done, one will refrain from it and only quotes that by the works the nations have put forward, one is able to recognize how they themselves have responded to it. As for the containment, depending on how people define things, that's a different kettle of fish.
Thank you again for that, Gregory. And I want to sort of again look at the things that are happening for people in this lockdown that we are going through. We're hearing on the news all the time. For example, you know, you're not allowed to meet. You're only supposed to stay at home, and don't go and meet outside other households. Let's say other members of the family who are in a different household. You're not allowed to do that, and that's a lot of restrictions, and all of these are having an impact. You know, everybody's impacted differently. Some of them, they're missing they're being lonely. You can say some of them is uh, health, having a mental problems with them. Just they can't handle it in a mental way. The mental I can't think of the right word for it right now. The mental health, it's affecting their mental health. And children, they're missing out on meeting their friends at school, things like that. I know this is we can't say it, we can only say it in overall sense because everybody's case is different. So what is my question about that? And yes, I guess I'll give another example, which is really, you could say, quite difficult, where people who are suffering domestic abuse or have been suffering domestic abuse are now locked down with their partners and children, and they're more prone to for this possibility of violence, and worried about themselves being vulnerable. We can call them, all these people, vulnerable, let's say. So how can these people be protected, or how can they protect themselves? Because they have to follow these rules now, and which I guess the government has thought about what they're doing, but then some of the restrictions are quite challenging, you can say, mentally and emotionally even. As I said, they're missing people and so on. How can those sort of people who are suffering in this way, how can they deal with that?
Every scenario, or whatever scenario one is in, affects different people differently. What has happened in this general one is what has been referred to as a lockdown. And in the lockdown, people respond to it differently. There are some who feel they should go out to do all sorts of things. But in this particular scenario, when some of these freedoms which have been assumed are now imposed on one, it only helps for that particular personality to reflect deeply that there are many who are still enduring such scenarios where they don't have any place to go in different parts of the world, be it in Africa, Middle East, all right, Europe, and the Americas. So how one responds to these challenges is a different kettle of fish. There are many who will use these challenges to reflect very deeply and mature very quickly out of it, such that whatever challenges may come subsequently, or in the near future, they themselves have become more intuitive. So on that hand, on that consideration, it has been of benefit. There are others who are so impatient as to sweep everything aside in such a way they come out of this temporary scenario and they have gained nothing because they have not reflected at all. Many times the excuse is about children. What they should never ever forget is that many of these parents who are complaining have not really given a thought to those who take care of these children when they are not at home. Hopefully for now, or for once, they will have a good idea of the responsibilities that the teachers themselves have taken upon themselves in the education of these children. Similar to what has happened to the nurses. Only now do we appreciate the work of the nurses. At the same time, to some extent, the works of the teachers. And these are the ones we had looked down haughtily on and say, oh, they don't have anything, they don't know anything. So even with the challenges that has been brought about through this coronavirus, there are many who can still reflect very deeply within and mature from it. Whereas for others, they gain nothing from it. And before long, when further challenges come, they find they are unable to withstand the storms which are likely to come before too long.
Thank you for that, Gregory. There's one more group of people which I'd like to talk about in this current situation climate that we're going through, which is the people who are losing their jobs, especially, well, not especially, but we are hearing of there are many industries. One of them is the airline, tourist, or type of that sort of leisure type industry, where it's like almost decimated. Actually, nobody's flying, or very few people are flying there, and the pilots and obviously airport people and so on are, let's say, so it's like a decimation of their industry, and that is just one group of people. And my question on those type of thing is that um, that it's not their own fault they have got into this situation, that this has happened to them. Other people, as I say, are still working, we know, or there's some or at least they've been given some emergency help for the thinking. But let's say this lockdown, we don't know, well, slowly we're going to come out of it, it's clear, but a lot of this devastation looks like going to happen in terms of the economy, you could say. So my question would be, is there hope for such people? Because it looks like it's going to take years to sort of come back, if I can use the word normal, but it's not going to be like the normal that we know. So my question is, is there something almost like they have, because we know the laws of nature and creation are perfect. Whatever happens to you, you have somehow been the cause for it to happen to you. But it's not so obvious and clear when there's a certain group of people in this industry are being affected like this, because let's say they won't be thinking about reflecting spiritually so much, more becoming how to stay alive. It's not only in the UK, we know it even, let's say, I just give example like Bangladesh, there were all these clothing workers, and suddenly the orders are cancelled, they're not going to get paid, and it's like complete, and there's a whole country almost economy, or a big part of their economy depends on this sort of work. So it's now going to disappear. It doesn't look like it's going to recover. So is there anything that can be said about such people who are suffering that?
Flexibility is one of the keystones, flexibility and rearrangement of the structures. Which structures brought about the collapse? Each personality affected must re-evaluate himself or herself and find out how, for continuity, he needs to readjust. Now, many are talking of, oh, instead of all of us on the road, oh, we could walk from our homes. Why must we all jump into the car? You have a massive vehicle, only one person inside, going for a meeting almost 100 miles away. That person could have stayed at home and had the meeting. So was it necessary? So you find some structures we need readjustment. Nations that have built themselves based on producing only one product will have to ask themselves, is this viable? Like you mentioned in Bangladesh, it is not as difficult as many assume that they themselves must continue as they were in the past. The lessons which many of us or many should learn from the past is that of vigilance and quick adjustment. As soon as many a person becomes open, they, before long, can turn their lives around. For in accordance with the laws of homogeneity, the laws of spiritual gravity, and motion being there, the law that it's what you put in that will enable you to move to the next level. Many will now sit in and start making adjustments. A quick correction. It doesn't mean that every scenario must have been caused by what initially you yourself have sown. The wisdom of the Almighty ensures that that scenario, which is of benefit to the human spirit, is made available. For most of the time, you will observe that unless there is something from the outside which jolts you to move from your present position, you won't move forward. You will say, as usual, give me that old-time religion. My father was a fisherman, I'm going to remain a fisherman. My father was a farmer, I'm going to remain a farmer. So there are times where many scenarios will come as a help to jolt one from this stupor they have found themselves. Life is meant to be lived. It is not meant to be as comfortable as before. Actually, in the past, before many nations gained independence, many were contented living in such squalor. But after independence, they became responsible for themselves, and there's a need to struggle. For life itself requires constant movement, constant maturing, and not remain on the same spot. So, those nations, like you mentioned, there are people there who are prepared immediately to take reins and sort of guide their nation to better heights. unless, however, they are too indolent to face the challenges. Thereby, because of their indolence, that which holds the nation together, that which is the center, cannot hold. In that case, things will have to fall apart. For it is the inner hate, the collective wisdom, and the collective abilities that hold the nation together. Each one is now forced to come together and reevaluate what they thought they had. Scenarios like this help us to arrive at such very quickly. But above all, whatever has come one's path only help to strengthen him for those who wish to see it that way, for those of good volition, for they will not give up, but will continue to move in such a way as to seek that which is better. And that which is better has a firm spiritual framework or a firm intuitive framework.
Thank you so much, Gregory. I just want to read something. I know we are told to speak from the heart, but I just want to share something from the Grail Message because I think it's appropriate now to do this, which is basically the foreword of the Grail Message for the listeners to just because the show is to point you to read and examine the Grail Message for yourself. The whole show is to introduce you to it, and we give our understanding. But in the end, the idea is to pick up for yourself and recognize for yourself what is in the knowledge that is given in the Grail Message. So this is from the foreword of the Grail Message, and it's titled "For Your Guidance." The bandage falls, and belief becomes conviction. Liberation and redemption lie only in conviction. I am addressing earnest seekers only. They must be able and willing to examine this matter objectively. Religious fanatics and irresponsible enthusiasts may hold aloof, for they are detrimental to the truth. As for the malevolent and prejudiced, they shall find their sentence in the very words. The message will strike only those who still carry within them a spark of truth and the yearning to be true human beings. To all such it will become the shining light and star. It will lead them unswervingly out of all the chaos of the present-day confusion. The following word does not bring a new religion, but is intended as the torch to help all serious listeners or readers find the right path, which leads them to the longed-for height. Only he who bestirs himself can advance spiritually. The fool who uses extraneous aids for this, in the form of ready-made opinions of others, only walks his path as if on crutches, while ignoring his own healthy limbs. But the moment he boldly uses all the abilities which lie dormant within him, awaiting his call to help in his ascent, he is employing the talent entrusted to him in accordance with his Creator's will, and will easily overcome all obstacles that seek to divert him. Therefore, awake. Genuine faith lies only in conviction, and conviction comes solely through an inflexible weighing and examining. See that you're truly alive in the wonderful creation of your God. Abdrushim. So, dear listeners, the Grail Message, obviously we talk about it all the time in the show. The idea is we want you to examine it for yourself. And so I just want to remind you, if you are interested, to get a copy for yourself or get some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grailmessage.com. Grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Gregory, I just want to ask you anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
Wishing them the strength to face the challenges that we all face.
Thank you. That's a lovely message. And dear listeners, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a, let's say, I would say quite revealing discussion, encouraging us to, investigate and be vigilant and really, deal with the situation that we are in. It's really, this is an opportunity for us really to really examine what is happening to this world and us. So I encourage you again to remind you again to pick up the Grail Message. We'll be back again as usual next Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with another new topic. We'll find that out when we get there next week. So all the best, everyone. Have a great week. Take care. God bless. Also, just to let you know, listeners, Sam is not there tonight, so his show won't be taking place tonight. So yes, so if you're expecting him, you won't be hearing from him tonight. So I wish everybody a great week. All the best, everybody. Take care. Bye.